I live on a quiet stretch of road just outside a small town in rural Kentucky, the kind of place where people still wave at you when you drive by, and everyone knows which truck belongs to which family. I'd moved here 5 years ago after retiring from construction work, thinking I'd finally found a bit of peace. My little 2-acre property sat right at the edge of a forest, with a gravel driveway leading up to my single-story house. There wasn't much around me besides trees, the faint smell of pine, and the low hum of cicadas that filled the evenings. It was calm, predictable, and exactly what I wanted. At least, that's how it used to be. The first time it happened, I thought it was just a stupid accident. I walked out one morning with my coffee, the air crisp enough to fog the rim of my mug, and saw my mailbox lying in the ditch, post snapped in half like a toothpick. The wooden box was dented, the numbers peeled off, and letters were scattered all over the gravel. I remember standing there for a long moment, just staring at it, trying to figure out if it was vandals, a drunk driver, or some dumb teenager messing around. Either way, it ruined my morning. I cleaned up the mess, hammered in a new post, and told myself it wouldn't happen again. But it did. A week later, I found the same thing. The mailbox was down again, this time crushed flat like someone had taken a baseball bat or the bumper of a car to it. My gut twisted with irritation. I'd built that post from pressure-treated lumber, sturdy enough to last a decade. Whoever did it had gone out of their way to destroy it. That wasn't an accident. That was deliberate. I remember fixing it again, this time with concrete at the base and a thicker post. I even installed a small camera near the tree line, an old trail cam I'd used for deer spotting during hunting season. I wasn't looking for trouble, I just wanted to catch whoever was doing this so I could ask them why. It seemed like such a small, stupid thing to keep happening, but it started to gnaw at me. Every morning, I'd step out of the house and glance down the driveway, half expecting to see it knocked over again. And sure enough, a week later, I did. This time, I didn't touch it. I walked straight inside, grabbed my laptop, and checked the footage from the trail cam. The image was grainy, the night vision green tint giving everything a ghostly glow. But there it was, a silver sedan pulling up around midnight, stopping right in front of my driveway. A woman stepped out. She wasn't some punk teenager or drunk idiot. She was an adult, maybe in her 30s or 40s, with her hair tied back and a jacket over her shoulders. I could see the reflection of the mailbox in her eyes as she swung something, a baseball bat, maybe a crowbar, and smashed the box clean off its post. Then she got back in her car and drove away like it was the most normal thing in the world. I just sat there, staring at the screen. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was confusion. Who the hell was she? I didn't recognize the car. I didn't recognize her. I didn't even know anyone who'd have a reason to hate me. I kept to myself, paid my taxes, waved to the neighbors, and didn't bother anyone. But there she was, clear as day, destroying my property like it was some kind of personal ritual. The next morning, I took the footage to the local sheriff's office. Sheriff McAllister was an old friend of mine from high school, big man, gray mustache, slow talker. He watched the footage twice before letting out a sigh. "Looks like you've got yourself a problem, Hank," he said, scratching his chin. "You know her?" I told him no. Never seen her before. He promised to keep an eye out and maybe run the plates if I could get a clearer shot next time. But it wasn't much of a lead. Around here, people drove from neighboring counties all the time, and the sheriff's department didn't exactly have the resources to chase down someone for a mailbox. Still, the whole thing bothered me. Every time I rebuilt that box, I did it a little stronger, thicker wood, better cement, new bolts. But every week, like clockwork, she came back. Midnight on a Friday. Smash, drive off, disappear. I stopped sleeping properly. I'd stay up late, watching through the blinds, shotgun propped near the window. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I wasn't going to let some lunatic terrorize me for fun. After the 4th or 5th time, I stopped calling the sheriff. He couldn't do much without catching her in the act, and I was tired of being told to let it go. I wasn't letting it go. That box was on my land. It had my name on it. It was a small thing, sure, but it was mine. Every time she smashed it, it felt like she was trying to send a message, like she was saying you don't matter here. One night, I decided to wait. I parked my truck a little further down the drive, near the tree line, and turned off all the lights. It was cold enough to see my breath. The moon hung low, silver and sharp, slicing through the branches. I kept the trail cam rolling, but this time, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Midnight came and went. 1 o'clock. Nothing. Around 2, I started thinking maybe she'd stopped. Maybe it was over. Then I heard it, the soft hum of an engine coming up the road. Headlights flickered through the trees. The silver sedan slowed as it approached my mailbox, and I felt my pulse start to climb. She stepped out again, same woman, same jacket, same quiet confidence. She didn't even look around. Just walked right up and raised that bat. That was when I snapped. I threw the truck door open and shouted, "Hey!" My voice echoed down the road. She froze, turned toward me, then bolted for the car. I ran after her, gravel crunching under my boots, but she was quick. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, the taillights were already disappearing into the dark. I stood there breathing hard, hands shaking from adrenaline and rage. For the first time, I saw her face clearly, just a glimpse, but enough. She looked angry. Not random, not playful, angry. That night, I couldn't shake the image of her eyes. Cold. Focused. Like this was personal. But I still didn't know why. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen with a notebook, trying to piece things together. Maybe she used to live around here. Maybe she thought the property was hers. Maybe it was mistaken identity. The mind goes to strange places when you're trying to make sense of madness. Days turned into weeks. She didn't come back right away, and part of me hoped it was over. I rebuilt the mailbox again, sturdier than ever, steel bracket, fresh coat of paint, even a concrete base. I told myself this one would last. But in my gut, I knew it wouldn't. When something like that gets under your skin, it's not just about the mailbox anymore. It's about control. It's about standing your ground. And when she came back again, smashing it for the 7th time, I decided that the next one I built wasn't going to be made of wood. It was going to be made of steel. And this time, I wasn't just going to rebuild it. I was going to wait. When I decided to rebuild the mailbox out of steel, it wasn't out of anger anymore. It was something colder, something more focused. I'd stopped thinking of it as a petty act of vandalism and started thinking of it like a challenge. Every time she came by, every swing of that bat, it was like she was daring me to respond. I'd ignored her. I'd rebuilt. I'd reported it. None of that worked. So now, I was going to do something different. I'd worked construction for 30 years before retiring, and I'd built everything from barns to bridges. Steel didn't scare me. I knew its weight, its balance, the way it could bend if you welded it wrong or hold strong enough to stop a car if you did it right. So I drove out to the old scrap yard 3 towns over, a place called Mason's Metalworks. Mason was a big guy with arms like tree trunks, and when I told him what I wanted to do, he laughed like I was telling a joke. "You're building a mailbox out of steel," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yup. Somebody must really hate your mail." "Not my mail," I said. "Me." He stopped laughing after that. Helped me pick out the materials himself, 1/4-inch steel plate for the box, a 6-foot galvanized post, and a hollow frame I could fill with concrete to make it immovable. It took me 3 days to weld everything together in my garage. The sound of the grinder echoed through the night, sparks bouncing off the walls, the smell of hot metal filling the air. It felt good to be working again, to have a project that needed strength and patience. By the time I was done, that thing looked like something straight out of a military base. Heavy, solid, with a slot big enough for letters but not wide enough for a hand. The door was spring-loaded, the hinges reinforced. It weighed close to 200 pounds. When I set it into the ground, I used 2 bags of concrete, buried it 3 feet deep, and bolted it from underneath. I remember stepping back, wiping the sweat off my neck, and smiling for the first time in months. This time, she wasn't going to break it. The next few nights were quiet. Too quiet. I'd sit on my porch in the dark, listening to the hum of crickets, the creak of the swing under me, and the faint ticking of the motion sensor camera I'd installed near the driveway. I felt like a hunter waiting for his prey, patient, alert, ready. But as each night passed without her showing up, I started to wonder if maybe she'd finally stopped. Then, one night, the sound of tires on gravel pulled me out of my chair. I didn't move right away. I just watched from the shadows. Headlights rolled slowly up the road, silver sedan, same one as before. It came to a stop in front of my property, the engine idling low. My heart started to thump in my chest, slow but heavy. I could see her silhouette through the windshield. She sat there for a moment, maybe thinking, maybe remembering the last time I shouted at her. Then she stepped out. She had the same bat, but this time, she didn't look so confident. She looked tense, almost jumpy. She glanced down the road, then up toward my house. I didn't move. She walked up to the mailbox, lifted the bat, and swung. The sound it made wasn't what she expected. Instead of wood cracking, it was steel ringing, a deep, sharp clang that echoed through the trees. The bat bounced right back, nearly flying out of her hands. She cursed under her breath, grabbed it again, and swung harder. Another clang. Sparks flew off the corner. The mailbox didn't move an inch. I watched her frustration build with each hit, until finally, she threw the bat to the ground, breathing hard, clutching her wrist. She bent down, picked it back up, and gave it one more swing, a full force, two-handed blow that ended with a loud metallic thud. She stumbled backward, shaking her hand. The mailbox stood there, gleaming under the moonlight, not a scratch on it. That's when I turned on the floodlight. The whole yard lit up like a stadium. She froze, wide-eyed, caught in the beam. For the first time, I saw her clearly. Brown hair tied back in a ponytail, dark jacket, jeans, sneakers. Her face was pale, but not from fear, from anger. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped forward. "You done?" I said, voice calm but sharp. She didn't answer. She just backed up toward her car, fumbling for the door handle. I didn't chase her, just stood there, watching as she slammed the door shut and tore off down the road, tires spitting gravel into the air. I stood under that floodlight for a long time after she was gone, the night quiet except for the hum of the lamp and the ringing in my ears. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. Something about the look in her eyes stayed with me. It wasn't embarrassment, or guilt. It was hate. Deep, old, familiar hate, the kind that doesn't come from a stranger. The next morning, I went into town to run a few errands. Stopped by the diner for breakfast, same as always. But when I walked in, I noticed a few people looking at me differently. Whispers. Glances. It's a small town, word gets around fast. Old man Charlie, who runs the hardware store, waved me over. "Hey Hank," he said quietly. "Heard you had some trouble again last night." "Yeah," I said, sitting down. "How'd you hear about that already?" He shrugged. "Someone said they saw a car tearing down your road at 2 in the morning. Silver sedan, right?" "That's her." "You know who that is?" I shook my head. Charlie leaned in a little closer. "Sounds like it might be Linda Porter." The name didn't ring a bell. "She used to live out near your road," he continued. "Couple years back, before you moved in? Had a property dispute or something? Lost a chunk of land to foreclosure, the same strip you're living on now? I felt something tighten in my chest. You telling me this used to be hers? He nodded. Her husband passed not long after. Word is, she blamed everyone, the bank, the county, the guy who bought it. That guy, apparently, was me. I didn't know what to say. I'd bought my land legally, through an agent, clean paperwork, no drama. I'd never even heard her name until now. But suddenly, everything made sense, the anger, the consistency, the personal edge to it all. She wasn't just smashing a mailbox. She was trying to erase me from land she thought was still hers. I sat there in the diner, stirring my coffee, staring out the window at the slow-moving morning traffic. It all seemed so small, so pointless, a patch of dirt, a stretch of road, a mailbox. But to her, it wasn't small. To her, it was a symbol of what she'd lost. That realization didn't make me feel sorry for her, though. It made me angrier. Because she could have come to talk. She could have knocked on my door, explained herself, maybe even found some peace. But she didn't. She chose violence. She chose to destroy something I worked for, week after week, because she couldn't move on. And now that I'd stood up to her, I knew she wasn't going to stop. That night, I sat out on the porch again, but not to wait for her. Just to think. The steel mailbox stood at the end of the driveway, glowing faintly under the moonlight, unshaken, unbroken. I could almost feel her rage from miles away. And somewhere deep inside, a part of me wanted her to come back, not because I wanted a fight, but because I wanted to see that look on her face again when she realized she couldn't win. 2 nights later, she did come back. But this time, she didn't come alone. I was lying in bed when I heard the sound, not 1 car, but 2. I got up, pulled on my boots, and went to the window. The first car was the silver sedan. The second was a dark pickup truck. They parked side by side in front of my property, engines running. 2 men got out of the truck, and my stomach dropped. They weren't holding bats. They were holding crowbars. I grabbed my phone, called the sheriff, and whispered what was happening. He told me to stay inside, said deputies were on the way. But as I looked out the window, I saw them walking toward the mailbox, laughing, talking, ready to rip it out of the ground. The woman stood by her car, watching. When the first man hit the mailbox, the sound echoed like thunder. It didn't budge. The second man swung his crowbar, denting the edge slightly, but the steel held. They swung again and again, metal on metal, sparks flying into the night. I could feel my blood boiling. And then, without even realizing it, I was outside. I stormed down the driveway, flashlight in one hand, shouting, "You think that's funny?" They froze. The 2 men turned, stepping back. The woman glared at me, her lips curling into something between a smirk and a sneer. "You took my land," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "You don't deserve to be here." "This land was for sale," I said. "You lost it fair and square." "You stole it," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You think a stupid metal box makes you safe?" One of the men started toward me, but the sound of sirens cut through the night, faint at first, then louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees. They panicked, bolted for their vehicles, and sped off down the road. The sheriff's truck came rolling up just seconds later, gravel flying behind him. He jumped out, looked at me, then at the dented mailbox, and let out a low whistle. "Well, Hank," he said, "I guess you got your proof now." He took my statement, took pictures, and promised to issue warrants for destruction of property and trespassing. But even after the flashing lights faded and the road went quiet again, I didn't feel safe. Not because I thought they'd come back tonight, but because I knew people like her don't just give up. When someone's driven by hate, by obsession, they'll find another way to get to you. And deep down, I knew, this wasn't over. After that night, I didn't sleep for 2 days. Every sound outside made me jump, the rustle of leaves, the hum of a passing car, even the creak of my porch boards when the wind hit them. The sheriff had done his best, he'd taken my statement, filed the report, and even promised extra patrols around my road for a week or 2. But small towns run on limited manpower, and I knew how this worked. Once things went quiet, I'd be on my own again. The mailbox stood there like a trophy, scarred but standing. The front corner had a dent from the crowbar, a small reminder of that night's madness. I left it there on purpose. It was proof that no matter what they threw at me, I wasn't moving. But something had changed. The attack stopped, no more midnight visitors, no more smashed mailboxes, no more strange cars idling down the road. At first, I thought it was over. I'd won. But silence, I've learned, can be just as dangerous as noise. Sometimes it's not peace, it's the calm before another storm. About 2 weeks later, I started noticing little things. Subtle. Off. My trash cans, which I always kept near the garage, were suddenly out by the road, lids missing, contents scattered. The motion lights on the side of my house flickered one night and didn't turn back on for days, even after I replaced the bulbs. One morning, I found deep boot prints in the mud near the back fence. They weren't mine. Then the phone calls started. They came late, always after midnight. I'd pick up, half asleep, and hear nothing, just silence on the other end. Sometimes a faint breath. Sometimes a click and hang up. I tried to brush it off, but after the 5th or 6th night, I stopped answering. I unplugged the landline altogether. That's when my cell phone started ringing instead. I knew it was her. I didn't have proof, but I could feel it. It was the same energy, cold, persistent, relentless. She wasn't smashing things anymore. She was trying to get inside my head. I told myself to stay calm, to not give her what she wanted. I filled my days with work around the property, repainting the porch, fixing the old shed, cutting firewood for winter. I tried to pretend everything was normal. But there were moments, especially at night, when I'd catch myself staring out the window, scanning the tree line, waiting for movement. About a month after the last attack, I decided to drive into town to clear my head. I stopped by the diner, grabbed coffee to go, and took a detour through Main Street. That's when I saw her. She was sitting in her car, the same silver sedan, parked across from the grocery store. Her hair was down this time, sunglasses covering her eyes, but I knew it was her. My stomach knotted instantly. I slowed down as I passed, trying not to make it obvious that I'd noticed her. She didn't move, didn't turn her head, didn't even blink. Just sat there, staring straight ahead. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. She was back. And if she was back, that meant she was planning something. That night, I installed 2 more cameras, one by the front porch, one by the backyard gate. I also added a new lock to the shed and motion sensors near the garage. If she wanted a game, I'd make sure I saw every move she made. But she didn't come back that night. Or the next. Or the next. Then, one morning, I went to grab my mail, and the box was gone. Not smashed. Not destroyed. Just gone. The entire steel box had been unbolted and taken, post and all. The concrete base was cracked where someone had pried it loose, and drag marks led toward the ditch by the road. I stood there, jaw clenched, heart pounding. That box weighed 200 pounds, it would have taken at least 2 people to move it. And the worst part was, I'd slept right through it. I checked the cameras, nothing. The feed had cut out around midnight, then resumed at 2:43 a.m., right after it was gone. Someone had killed the power to them. This wasn't vandalism anymore. This was war. I drove straight to the sheriff's office with the photos. McAllister looked at them, rubbing his temples like a man who'd seen too much nonsense for one lifetime. Damn shame, he muttered. You said it was bolted in. 4 bolts, 8 inches deep. Concrete base. And gone without a trace. Yup. He sighed. Hank, I'll be honest with you, this is getting out of hand. But we can't arrest someone without catching them red-handed. Then maybe you should camp out at my house, I said, half joking, half serious. He gave me a look, part pity, part warning. Just, don't do anything stupid, he said finally. I nodded, but I think we both knew it was too late for that. I went home and sat in the driveway for a long time, staring at the empty patch of ground where my mailbox used to be. That spot had become a symbol of everything wrong in my life, a small, stupid thing that somehow represented every bit of rage, grief, and helplessness I'd bottled up. I'd rebuilt it so many times I'd lost count. And now, it was gone again. But I wasn't defeated. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. I went back to Mason's scrapyard and bought new steel. He raised an eyebrow when he saw me. Another one? He asked. Yeah, I said. But this time, it's not just a mailbox. It took me a week to build the new one, heavier, thicker, reinforced with a solid steel post. But I also added something extra, a hidden GPS tracker welded inside the base, one that would ping my phone every hour. I wanted to know where it went if she tried again. I even coated the entire thing in reflective paint to make it shine like a beacon at night. When I set it up, I also added a motion sensor alarm under the ground near the base. If anyone messed with it, I'd know instantly. That first night, I barely slept. Every few minutes, I checked my phone, refreshing the GPS feed. Nothing. By the second night, I started to relax a little. Maybe the message had finally gotten through. Maybe she'd realized she couldn't win. But around 3 a.m. on the third night, my phone buzzed. Alert, movement detected. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, grabbed my flashlight and ran to the window. A car was idling at the end of the drive, headlights off. I couldn't see who was inside, but the outline looked familiar. Silver sedan. I slipped my boots on, grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The night was still, no wind, no crickets, just the distant rumble of the engine. My feet crunched on the gravel as I walked closer. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Then I saw her step out. She didn't have a bat this time. She was holding something smaller, a crowbar maybe, or a wrench. Her face was pale in the moonlight, eyes dark, jaw tight. She didn't look like someone trying to scare me anymore. She looked like someone desperate. Linda. I called out, voice steady but low. She froze. Her eyes flicked toward me, recognition flashing across her face. Then she smiled, not the kind of smile you give a friend, but the kind that says I'm not done yet. You can't have what's mine, she said, voice shaking. This isn't yours. I shouted back. It hasn't been for years. She took a step closer. You think you can build walls and steal and hide behind them? You don't deserve this place. You don't deserve peace. Something in her voice cracked then, not anger, but pain. It made me pause. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then she swung. The crowbar hit the side of the mailbox, ringing through the night like a gunshot. I lunged forward, grabbing her arm. She struggled, wild and furious, screaming curses that barely sounded human. The metal glinted between us, the flashlight beam bouncing off her face. Her eyes were wide, not with hate anymore, but with pure, blind rage. We wrestled in the gravel, her trying to break free, me trying to keep her from hurting herself or me. The crowbar clanged against the ground, sparks flying. Then, just as suddenly as it started, she stopped fighting. She pulled away, breathing hard, staring at me with tears in her eyes. You ruined my life, she whispered. He died because of this place. Because they took it. I froze. What are you talking about? I asked, but she was already backing up toward her car. She didn't answer. She just got in, slammed the door, and drove off into the dark. I stood there for a long time, the sound of her engine fading into the trees, the night swallowing everything back up. For the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel angry. I felt heavy. Empty. There was a story behind her madness, something broken that went deeper than I'd realized. But that didn't mean I could forgive her. The next morning, I went to see Sheriff McAllister again, told him everything that happened. He listened quietly, nodding, taking notes. When I mentioned what she'd said about her husband, he frowned. Yeah, he said finally. Her husband, Mark Porter, he passed right after they lost their property. Heart attack. She blamed the stress. The foreclosure notice came 2 days before he died. He closed his notebook, sighed. She's been unstable since then. You might want to consider getting a restraining order. I told him I would. But I also knew, a piece of paper wouldn't stop her. That night, I reinforced the locks on my doors, loaded the old hunting rifle I kept for coyotes, and set it by the bed. I didn't want to use it, but I also wasn't going to be caught off guard again. I sat there in the dark, staring out the window at that gleaming steel box, waiting. Not for mail, not for peace, but for the next move in a war I hadn't asked for. And somewhere out there, I knew she was waiting too. After that confrontation, the days crawled by with a strange kind of quiet. I still woke up before sunrise out of habit, brewed my coffee, and sat by the kitchen window staring at that new steel mailbox gleaming under the early light. It had become more than a box for mail, it was a monument. A symbol of everything that had spiraled out of control. But I could feel something coming. You get that gut feeling after years of working outdoors, watching storms roll across the horizon, you just know when the air feels heavy. That week, the air was thick. Not just with humidity, but with tension. The sheriff had officially filed the restraining order. I got a copy in the mail, ironic, considering all the chaos that Mailbox had seen. McAllister told me to stay alert, that she'd been questioned but released because there wasn't enough evidence to hold her long-term. She's angry, Hank, he'd said. But she's also broken. Keep your distance. I wanted to believe she'd finally let go, but deep down, I knew she wouldn't. People who live in anger don't just stop, they simmer until something makes them boil over. 3 nights later, around 11, I was sitting in the living room with the TV on low when the motion alarm buzzed on my phone. My stomach dropped. I opened the app, expecting maybe a raccoon or stray dog. But it wasn't that. It was her car. Parked halfway up my drive. Lights off. Engine running. My pulse started pounding in my ears. I turned off the TV, grabbed my flashlight, and peeked through the blinds. The silver sedan sat there like a ghost, quiet, still, watching. No movement inside. Just headlights faintly reflecting off the steel of the mailbox. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd finally come to talk. Maybe she'd realized how insane this had gotten. I even thought about walking out and ending this once and for all, just 2 people talking under the stars, no cops, no anger. Then I saw the flames. A flash of orange burst near the ground beside the mailbox. Then another. Then another. Gasoline. My breath caught in my throat as the fire licked upward, swallowing the grass, crawling toward the post. Jesus Christ, I muttered, running for the door. By the time I hit the porch, the fire had already spread into a wide, hungry circle, throwing heat into the cool night air. She was standing there, holding an empty canister, the look on her face twisted between rage and grief. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. She turned slowly, eyes shining wild in the firelight. "This land killed him," she screamed. "Every time I see it, I see his face. You don't get to live here like nothing happened. Put that down." I yelled, stepping closer. But she didn't move. The flames were reflecting off the mailbox now, dancing across the steel, casting flickering light on both of us. For a split second, I thought she was going to run, but instead, she took a step toward me, the gas can still dripping from her hand. I stopped moving. She looked exhausted, like every ounce of hatred had burned her hollow. "You don't understand," she said softly. "You took everything." "I didn't take anything," I said. "You lost it before I ever came here." That set her off again. She raised the gas can as if to throw it at me, and I lunged forward, grabbing it before she could. It clattered to the ground between us. She stumbled back, slipped on the wet grass, and fell hard. For a second, neither of us moved. The fire crackled around us, smoke rising into the dark. Then, from the distance, I heard sirens. Someone must have called 911 after seeing the glow. She looked up at me, eyes wet, face streaked with dirt and tears, and said something I'll never forget. "I just wanted him to rest. But every time I see that mailbox, I see you. And I see him dying again." I didn't know what to say. The words stuck in my throat. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees. She looked at them, then back at me, like she was making a decision in her head. And before I could react, she got up, turned, and ran toward the car. "Linda!" I shouted. She didn't stop. Her tires spun in the gravel as she tore down the road. The sheriff's truck passed her going the opposite direction, lights flashing, kicking up dust. He stopped at my driveway, jumped out, and shouted, "You all right?" "Yeah," I said, coughing through the smoke. "She tried to burn it. He and the deputies got the fire under control before it spread too far." The mailbox, made of steel, stood untouched in the center of the chaos, blackened but unbroken. McAllister stared at it, then at me. "Well," he said, "guess you built it strong enough." I didn't laugh. I couldn't. They took my statement again, promised they'd find her. But this time, they didn't need to search long. The next morning, I got a call. McAllister's voice was low, almost hesitant. "Hank, we found her car." "Where?" I asked. "About 6 miles from you. Down by the creek road." "And?" He paused. "It looks like she lost control. Went off the bridge." I didn't say anything. Just sat there in silence, the phone cold against my ear. He cleared his throat. "She didn't make it." The line went quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry, Hank. I really am. I think this whole thing just pushed her too far." After he hung up, I stayed sitting there, staring at the wall. My coffee had gone cold. My hands felt numb. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or guilty, or both. The woman who tormented me for months was gone. The danger was gone. But so was the chance for understanding. That afternoon, I walked down to the mailbox. The ground was charred black where the fire had burned. The air still smelled faintly of smoke and melted plastic. The steel box stood like a silent witness to everything that had happened, strong, immovable, and now, strangely lonely. I brushed my hand along its side, feeling the rough soot against the smooth metal. For the first time, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a tombstone. I spent the next few weeks cleaning up the damage. Resodded the burned patches, repainted the fence, replaced the camera wires that had melted in the heat. The sheriff stopped by a couple of times to check in, but after that, life started to fall back into a rhythm. The silence returned, but this time, it was real. And yet, there were moments when I'd still glance down the road, half expecting to see headlights cutting through the trees. Sometimes I thought I did, just for a second, a flash of silver, a glint of chrome. But it was always nothing. Just my mind replaying old fears like a broken film reel. A few months later, a letter came in the mail. It was from the county clerk's office. Inside was a deed correction notice. They'd officially updated the historical record of the property. Attached was a short note from the sheriff. Her family asked if you'd accept this as closure. She had no next of kin. Closure. The word sat heavy on my tongue as I read it again and again. There's no real closure in situations like that. You can rebuild, repaint, reseed, but the cracks remain. I walked outside that evening, the air warm and soft, fireflies floating lazily over the grass. The mailbox gleamed under the porch light, freshly polished, still standing tall. I placed the letter inside and closed the lid gently. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger or fear, just quiet. But even as peace settled back over my life, a part of me couldn't shake the thought that somewhere, somehow, the echoes of that woman's pain were still out there. That maybe when the wind blew through the trees at night, it carried a piece of her with it, her grief, her rage, her confusion, all tied to this patch of land and a man who just wanted to be left alone. And maybe that's what the steel was for all along, not to keep her out, but to hold up against the weight of everything we both carried. It's been almost a year since that night. A whole year since the flames, the shouting, the smell of gasoline on the wind. Sometimes it feels like it all happened yesterday. Sometimes, like it was someone else's life entirely. The seasons rolled over this place like waves. Spring painted the fields green again. Summer baked the ground dry and hard. Fall brought orange leaves that tumbled against the mailbox post, gathering in quiet drifts. And winter, well, winter made everything still. I kept to myself through it all. The neighbors, the few that lived within shouting distance, stopped by occasionally, mostly out of curiosity. Word travels fast in small towns, and everyone knew about the mailbox story. Some came just to look at it, that heavy steel box, half legend now. They'd knock on my door, coffee in hand, and say things like, "So this is the famous mailbox, huh?" Or, "You really built it out of solid steel?" I'd nod, maybe smile a little, then tell them yeah, it's real. They'd shake their heads, murmur something about crazy people these days, and drive off again. But no one really understood what it meant. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. When I welded that mailbox together, I thought I was building armor. A way to fight back against someone who wouldn't leave me alone. But now, when I run my hand across that cool metal each morning, it feels different. It's heavy, sure, but not with anger. With memory. With everything that came before it. A few months after the fire, McAllister stopped by one last time. He was retiring, heading out west to live with his daughter. He stood by the truck, squinting at the mailbox like it was an old war monument. "You know," he said, "you could have just put up a camera and called it a day." I laughed softly. "Guess I don't do things halfway." He smirked. "No, you sure don't." He looked around the yard, the grass finally grown back, the fence painted fresh. "You ever think about selling this place? Starting somewhere new?" I shook my head. "Thought about it. But this land's been through enough running. Time to let it stand still." He nodded, then reached out and patted my shoulder. "You did good, Hank. Even if it got ugly. You held your ground." After he left, I stood there for a long time, watching the dust trail disappear down the road. The world had moved on. But I was still here, still watching the mailbox, still guarding it like it was something sacred. Then, one afternoon in late spring, I heard a car pull up. Not the sheriff's, not the mail truck, something older. A rust-colored pickup with a dented fender and faded license plate. A woman stepped out. Couldn't have been more than 25. Long brown hair, nervous eyes. She walked up the drive slow, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping off the porch. She nodded slightly. "You're Hank, right?" "That's me." She swallowed, looked down at her shoes. My name's Emily. Linda was my aunt. I froze. The name hit like a cold wind through the chest. She never talked much about family, I said quietly. No, she replied. We didn't talk for years. My mom said she got bitter after her husband passed. Said she pushed everyone away. She looked at the mailbox then, its steel face glinting under the sun. I heard what happened, she said softly. And I wanted to see it. I guess part of me just needed to know the whole story. I didn't say anything at first. Then I motioned toward the porch. You want some coffee? She smiled faintly. Sure. We sat for a long while without speaking. She told me about her aunt, how she used to paint landscapes, how she loved gardening, how she used to bake pies every Sunday before grief swallowed her whole. When she finished, she sighed. She wasn't always angry, you know. She just didn't know what to do with pain. I figured, I said quietly. She nodded, looking out toward the field. I think you were the only one who stood up to her. Most people just avoided her. Maybe that's what made her so furious, someone not afraid of her anymore. I thought about that for a while. Then I said, she wasn't my enemy. I just wanted peace. I think she wanted that too, Emily said. She just didn't know how to find it. Before she left, she asked if she could put something by the mailbox. I told her yes. She walked down to the edge of the drive, knelt, and placed a small framed photo beside the post. In it was Linda, smiling, standing beside a man holding a fishing rod by a lake. They looked happy. Alive. Emily stood up, brushed her hands on her jeans, and said, she used to say he'd come back in the wind. Maybe that's where she is now. When she drove away, I stayed standing there, watching the picture flutter slightly in the breeze. The steel mailbox loomed above it like a silent guardian. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat on the porch and listened. The crickets, the faint rustle of wind through the grass, the quiet hum of life returning to normal. And in that calm, I thought about everything that had happened, the fire, the shouting, the loneliness, the strange sort of closure that never really closes anything. Sometimes I still dream about her. Not the angry woman with the gas can, but the one from that photo. The one who used to laugh. In those dreams, she walks down the road, looks at me, and just nods. Like she's saying it's over. I wake up before dawn, pour my coffee, and step outside. The air always smells fresh at that hour, clean and full of promise. The mailbox gleams silver in the sunrise, unscarred now, standing tall and still. The mail truck comes around 7. The driver's new, a young guy who waves every morning and says, that thing could survive a tornado. I just smile. It already has. Some mornings, I still check the cameras out of habit. They haven't caught anything unusual in months. But I keep them running anyway, not out of fear, but because it's what I do now. I protect what's mine. And yet, there's a strange peace in all of it. Maybe the kind that only comes after chaos. When you've seen the worst of someone, and the worst of yourself, and somehow lived through it. I've thought about taking that mailbox down more than once. Selling the steel, planting flowers there instead. But every time I grab the wrench, I stop. Because that mailbox isn't just a box anymore. It's a story. A reminder. A warning. People talk about forgiveness like it's a single act. But it's not. It's a habit. A choice you make every morning, to keep moving, to let the ghosts pass through without grabbing hold. So I leave it standing. And every evening, when the wind picks up through the trees, I swear I can hear a faint sound, like metal ringing softly, almost like laughter. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's her. Either way, I nod toward the road and say quietly, rest easy, Linda. Then I walk back inside, shut the door, and let the world grow quiet again. Because sometimes, the strongest things we build aren't made of steel, they're made of forgiveness.